Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Bear Experiment podcast. I'm your host, Monica Clavijo, and today we're diving into the spiritual awakening journey with Logan Barone. Now, he's a best-selling author, spiritual life coach, and former evangelical minister. His personal transformation took him from the rigid religious doctrine to a deep inner connection with the divine. This episode is about breaking free from fear based conditioning, embracing mystical wisdom, and reconnecting with the truth that God lives within you. I want to thank you all for all of your support and to please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel so that you never miss an amazing episode with all of our amazing guests that are coming on here to help and educate all of us further elevate our spiritual growth. Now let's dive in.
Thank you for this opportunity.
Oh, please. It's my pleasure. I'm honored to have you on the show. Um, I'm trying to position the podcast where it's a lot more about spiritual awakening and just like the shift that's happening right now on this planet. And I think with humanity and we need more people to not be so embarrassed to speak about this subject because I think a lot of people are, you know? Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, so you're hearing me okay? Okay, I'm
Yeah. How about, can you
recording.
hear me okay?
Yeah. Oh, I hear you perfect. I hear you perfect.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
Uh,
Great.
Okay, so you ready?
Yeah. Let's get into it.
Okay, so let's start with your background a little bit, Logan. So take us back to that moment in high school when you felt called to ministry. Like, what were you seeking at that time?
Yeah. Well, I think a big part of that had to do with just my upbringing, right? So, like, I was born into Christianity. I was Catholic at first. And then when I was 11, my family left the Catholic Church and became evangelical. And I think when I became evangelical, that was the first time that I really started getting into the Bible because growing up as a Catholic, I didn't read the Bible that much. It
Mhm.
was more of going to Mass and going through the sacraments and praying, but there wasn't a lot of the Bible. But now that I'm in this now that I was stepping into this evangelical world at the time, everything was about the Bible. And the Bible was now being considered to be almost like on this equal level as God, being the word of God. And it was like the ultimate authority. And so I think during that time, studying the Bible and then just falling in love with everything that comes with the evangelical world at the time is what led me to decide 4 years later, 5 years later, that, okay, this is something that I want to do for the rest of my life. I want to be a pastor. I want to be an evangelist. I want to spread the gospel. And I felt called to do that. And so that's why I decided to right out of high school when I went to a Christian high school where I was studying the Bible even more when I'd go to school. But as soon as I graduated, I took a year to just go into ministry full time to really decide what my career was going to look like in ministry,
Mhm.
which was helpful. A lot of praying and fasting happened during that time. And then it was clear that I was supposed to go to college. And so I went to Oral Roberts University, and that's where I earned my bachelor's degree. And that's when everything kind of took off from there. And I worked for a church. Was training to be a pastor, but it was actually when I was at ORU. Uh, that was when things started to shift a little bit, and I started to question a lot of the things that I grew up believing, and that led to my awakening.
When you major to become a pastor, what are you majoring in? Theology? What biblical studies? Like, what's the major that you focus on at that point?
It was just ministry. It was ministry and leadership. But I studied a lot of in that. I studied a lot of theology. Just
Hmm.
Christian theology, hermeneutics, Old Testament, New Testament. So I got a taste of the different aspects of Christianity in and of itself uh, from that perspective, from that university. But a lot of what I was learning there was not new information to me.
Right.
Because again, I grew up in this world. I grew up going to church. I grew up in ministry years before I ever went to college. So I can't say that there was ever a time where, I learned something at college that I didn't really already know.
But maybe you got a bigger, profound understanding for it at that point because you were seeking it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are some of the first cracks in your belief system that made you question the evangelical path?
Yeah. I think it was honestly for me, it started with end times eschatology because I had a friend who loved studying eschatology. And he started challenging me on some of my beliefs, where, at the time I was a dispensationalist and I believed that we were living in the end times. And I believed that all of these futuristic statements in the New Testament, are just even in the Bible, in the entire Bible, were referring to things that were happening to us in this day and age. And in fact, like I remember, so going back to 2011, when my family left the Catholic Church and we started going to this Protestant evangelical church, during that time, a lot of people were talking about how the end of the world was going to happen in 2012.
Yeah, I remember.
Or people were saying that the rapture would occur in
Oh yeah,
2012. So that was kind of my introduction to evangelicalism and really studying the Bible. And so one of the first books that I really studied at like 12 years old was the book of Revelation,
really? Okay.
because I was being told that, hey, this is the book that has all the details and what's going to happen in the end times. And we're like living in the last hours. So you need to know, you need to study this book. So I did.
You wanted to see the signs. You wanted to be clear of the signs you were watching.
Exactly. Exactly. So that was always, and I always felt like as I journeyed in my Christian walk, I always felt like eschatology, the end times, was my main thing. And when I would start to teach and preach later on in ministry, I would always go back to that because I knew I was so um, educated in that subject. And I used it for evangelism because it works. If you go around telling people, hey, Jesus is coming back any day, any second. If you don't repent, then you could go to hell. A lot of people say, yeah, I'll believe in what you're saying just so I can escape hell or just so I can escape judgment.
Right.
So that was a big part of evangelism. But yeah, so that was the first thing I started questioning because, again, I had one friend who knew more than I did about the Bible and hermeneutics and just everything. And they started challenging me on certain things that I couldn't answer. And that
Mhm.
caused me to go back and revisit the scriptures and to see them from a different lens. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it.
Yep. Yep. Once you start questioning everything, that's when that spiritual awakening really starts developing and starts happening for you. Um,
Right,
you
right.
talk about the dark night of the soul happened to you during this evolvement that you were going through spiritually.
Yeah.
Walk us through that part. Like, what did you feel? Was it depression? Were you isolating yourself from the world? Because it gets to a point that people's energy just drains you when you're going through that motion of evolvement, right? Walk us through what you went through.
Yeah. Well, before I get there, let me just say this. So, when I started to deconstruct and change my mind about eschatology, I don't need to get into like what that looked like and how that whole process unfolded because we'd be here for a few hours.
Mm-hmm.
But what I will say is that led to me questioning other things like the doctrine of original sin, the idea of hell, eternal separation from God, eternal punishment. And so my dark night of the soul actually started while this was probably junior, senior year of college when this all started. And I was really, I'd go back home and I wasn't telling anyone at the time that I was questioning these things because I knew if I brought this up to my pastor or professor or whoever, there are certain questions that you just don't ask.
Yeah, they would talk you out of it.
Right,
Yeah,
right. And I knew that. So I'm like, I can't share this with anybody. So going back home, like doing my own research, really for the first time, which, yeah, that was really liberating because I realized during those moments that I had never actually formed my beliefs independently.
right.
Up
They were
until
all
that
taught.
point,
Hmm.
yeah, everything that I was believing in were things that were just given to me. I accepted them and I didn't question them.
Hmm.
So just I think, if I had to think about when my awakening really started, I would say it was then when I started to just be curious and I started questioning because that was when I could literally feel the expansion of consciousness.
Hmm.
And but so okay, so when I started to let go of these beliefs because of what I was looking into, and a lot of this consisted of studying church history.
Hmm.
Studying church history is what ultimately led me out of Christian fundamentalism. Um, and so when I started to change my mind about these things, it's like, okay, when you're programmed to believe a certain way for so long, these ideas, these beliefs become embedded in your subconscious mind. And your nervous system really believes in these things too. And your nervous system over the years gets conditioned to act a certain way out of anxiety, out of fear, out of shame, according to what you've been led to believe subconsciously. So I think the process of just that, like changing my mind about these deep, really big questions and things that I was believing in to be absolute truths. That's what started the dark night of the soul for me. But I was so at that point I was so determined to just know the truth that I was like, this is worth it. And I will go through hell in order to experience what is, to get to this truth. So I think that's what really inspired me and motivated me to embrace the suffering and everything I was going through at the time. And what do you know? The universe has an interesting way of mirroring what we're going through within in our perceived external world. So I had so
Yes.
many different things happening that were very challenging to navigate and yeah, like so that was happening. The stuff within with the deconstructing and changing my mind was happening, and for about a year, it really was hell on earth for me. It was the most challenging season of my life by far because I got to a place where I said, I can't hold this in anymore. And so when I stopped working for the church that I was working at and I got this other job, I said, okay, maybe now is the time because I'm not really connected. I'm not on staff anymore. Maybe now I can start sharing what I believe now and maybe a little bit about my journey. And when I did that, that's when I started to lose a lot of friends.
Yeah.
And that's when my spiritual community reached out to me and they were like, hey, what are you posting? And why are you saying these things? You know that we
Yeah.
don't believe in these things as a church, as a community. You're
Why are you
going
going? Why are you?
against the
Why are you?
grain.
You're going against the grain of what we believe in. Absolutely. Was there anybody in particular when you were open or felt ready, that you needed somebody to talk to at that point that you could go to just talk to them and let them know kind of the feelings that you were going through and what you were thinking and questioning?
Yeah, one person. And it was the same person who questioned me on the eschatology.
Oh, okay. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So
was it
it's
help? Was it
interesting
helpful?
immensely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if I would have made it through without this person
Yeah.
because, like I said, it was just to go through that kind of shift, especially at a time in my life where I had so many other things happening. I was engaged, about to be married, I was moving, switching jobs, graduating.
It's like your
I
whole
had a
life
lot.
starts shifting, right? Like as you're going through this, your entire life just changes. And what you're looking for is consistency at that point because you're feeling so lost and so broken. And the complete opposite is happening. I find that fascinating, right? It's almost like you
Yeah.
say, it's our self-reflection, and we're putting these obstacles to make us stronger so that we
Yeah.
understand how capable we truly are within. We have all these beliefs and we're so fear-based with everything that they're putting in front of us. And I find it fascinating because when people get to that point of awakening where you're at, everybody has the same final thoughts on it. It's kind of like it takes a minute to get here, but when you do arrive, it's a beautiful way to live, right? It's the only way to live,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
So with that being said, you talk about like you're not broken, you're just waking up, right? So what does that
Yeah. Yeah.
awakening really mean?
Yeah. So, awakening to me is simply allowing the real you to shine. And for so many people, they want that. They're longing for that. But it's just too much to let go of all the conditionings and all the programmings that are covering their true authentic selves. And so I reached the point in my journey where I said, okay, I have a choice. Either I can pretend like I don't know what I know now, and I
Right.
can go back into the system, back into the old ways, and just live in a way that's, um, yeah, it's like
Expected,
I
almost like
know,
expected of you.
yeah, yeah, a lot of performance, but living in a way where there's this conflict of inside my heart, I know what the truth is, I know what I'm experiencing, and
Mm.
it doesn't align with what all these people are telling me, but I'm just going to fake it and pretend like I agree and just to fit in. So, knowing that if I were to do that, I would maintain all these relationships I had built over the years, I would, maintain the status that I had and my reputation and all these things. It was a very egoic thing. But I knew that that was option one. Option two was to be true to myself at the time and to start sharing what I knew intuitively I had to start sharing
Hmm.
publicly. And then, chance losing all these people and being mocked and being called a heretic and being asked to, no longer be a part of the spiritual community that I was, whatever it was. Like I knew that I was going to have to face all those things. And I did. But when I went with the option of being true to myself and following what I knew in my heart I had to follow, regardless of what it looked like, the amount of peace I started to live with,
Yeah.
despite being in this storm of, again, being called the heretic, being called deceived by the devil, and all these things, all the judgment, all the condemnation that was coming at me, it wasn't phasing me at all because for the first time in my life, I was just being me and I was experiencing this inherent liberation, this inherent wholeness that was always there. But again, it was just covered up by these different ideas and beliefs about myself that came with the religious indoctrination and programming. So, yeah, I was like, there's nothing to go back to. Why would I go back to living that way when I'm free right now? And as time would go on, as I kept following my bliss, as I kept being true to me, and I started to share and express my authenticity through writing and through creating content, I started to connect with these people all over the world who had had very similar experiences
Right.
that I had and that were walking similar paths. And so we started to connect and it showed me that I truly wasn't alone. And going back to when I was leaving the church, one of the last scare tactics they threw at me was, hey, if you go down this path, you're going to be isolated. You're not going to have any friends. People are going to think you're crazy. And that's, you're never going to have spiritual community because no one believes the things that you're saying. And that was a total lie. And I proved it to be wrong because, again, obviously it wasn't immediately. It took some time. And there was a season, a few years actually, where I did feel pretty alone.
Yes.
But as I just kept moving forward, I realized that, okay, that season of solitude was actually necessary
Hmm.
for the early stages of my awakening. and for my spiritual development. But it was just a season, it was just a phase. And when the time was right, like I'm telling you, as I continued to express my authentic self, then these like minded souls just started showing up at the right time. And I was able to even start a community
Yeah.
based upon those people. And it's just been a beautiful thing.
It's
Yeah.
beautiful when you find your tribe. It really is, and God, the universe has a way of removing the wrong people out of your life so that the right ones can come in at the right time, right? Everything is supposed to be an experience and a lesson, and we just need to learn how to kind of go with that flow and not question things so much for control because ultimately that's what we're all trying to do, and we can't. We can't see the bigger picture
Right.
the way the universe, can see it, which um,
Right.
it's fascinating to me. You talk about how religion, as you experienced it, made you feel ashamed of being human.
Hmm.
How did that, why did it make you feel ashamed of being human? Because of
Well,
the judgment that you were receiving?
I think for me, and maybe this isn't the case for everyone that grows up in religion or Christianity or whatever, but for me, one of the first things I remember being taught was that my true nature is sinful and separated from God, and I deserve eternal punishment simply for existing. And so that's why, there's that belief in Catholicism, at least, or
Yes,
maybe in some branches of Catholicism, that when a person is born, they have to be baptized pretty quickly, as an infant. Because if they're not baptized and something
hmm,
happens, then they could go to hell. Again, why do they believe that? Well, the
right.
belief is that you're born with something called original sin. And that at that point, that is the deepest fundamental truth of you. You're a sinner and you deserve punishment and wrath for existence, for just being. And so yeah, that was something that not only was I told that and taught that, but everyone else around me believed that.
Yeah,
So that was a part of my programming. And even after, I would say, even after I changed my mind about that belief, which, honestly, I think when I was an evangelical, like maybe in high school or something like that, um, I don't know if I believed that anymore. As far as what I grew up believing, I still believed in it to a degree. As far as I don't know. I think I had different beliefs at the time, but it wasn't as strong as when I was a kid. Um, but when I got to college and I totally let go of it, even though I let go of it theologically or like, from my mind, my body still remembered
of
the
course.
fear
The
and the
subcon
shame that
it's that
came with
programming.
believing in that.
Hmm.
Yeah. So it took, and that's why I said that year or really 2 years of solitude and a lot of meditation, a lot of contemplative experiences and inner work and shadow work. During that time, I was allowing myself to fully feel the emotions that were attached to believing these certain lies. And in allowing myself to just be with these different feelings, to sit with them, to allow them to flow, because that's what they are, their energy, that's when I could actually experience the healing and the nervous system regulation and the subconscious reprogramming. So, you know, it took some time, and that's why I always tell people, like, you can believe in certain things, and there's these different doctrines that, most of us who grew up in the church grow up hearing and believing, but you can even go through a season of deconstruction where you're letting go of all of that, where you say, I don't believe in this or that
Right.
anymore. Your mind might not believe in it anymore, but your body still does.
Yeah.
Your nervous system still does. And that's, typically that's what creates this feeling of not being enough, of unworthiness, of there's something wrong with me. And because that's still embedded in your subconscious, that ends up creating these patterns and cycles in your life, which, at this point have nothing to do with religion. They just have to do with you and what you're experiencing. But the root of it is what you were taught and what your subconscious still remembers and what your nervous system still feels. And until you address the root and really do the inner work and spend
Right.
time allowing yourself to feel everything that you need to feel in order to heal, you have to feel it to heal it. You're never going to actually experience transcendence from what those lies produced within you.
Yeah. It's so great the way that you position it also because you talk about fear being the biggest religion in the world, and I couldn't agree with you more. All of the teachings or the majority of the teachings of any religious organization is fear-based. Everything is fear-based, and that's the only way that they can really control us, right? Because for
Yeah.
eternal glory, we need to be afraid of this, or if not, we're going to be condemned. And in essence, I think the reality of it also is put it into practice. Why is it that we feel so much closer to God or that higher power when we're out in nature looking at the sun, right? Holding a tree, walking barefoot, as opposed to being inside a church? Right?
Yeah.
Like there's
Yeah.
just there's a different connection that you feel when you're out in nature as opposed to, being stuck in a church. You hear the pastor or the priest speaking verses out of the Bible, go up there, donate money. It's just it's a business. It's a business that you're in there. And it's like kind of like, okay, I checked it off. I went to church on Sunday. Now let me go do drugs. Let me go, right? It's like, and then I'll just come next Sunday and I'm gonna be forgiven because I came over here and I took all the sacraments. There's something wrong with this, with the setup that they have going on. And yet, we're
Yeah.
so, everyone is doing it, but more and more people are starting to wake up, which is the beauty of what's happening right now. Um,
Yeah.
so for example, how do we reconnect to that childlike state? Before all of this fear and conditioning took over us? Like, what are other ways? Meditation, I know that that's a big one, right? But not everybody finds meditation
Hmm.
to be very easy. So, what are some ways
Right.
for us to get back to that, when we were kids and we were 5 years old, that, we were laughing and playing and and life was just fun, you know?
Yeah.
Unlike now, we think before we
Yeah.
speak because what are people going to think with what I'm going to say? And so how do we
Yeah.
get how do we get back to that point in our lives of pure authenticity?
Yeah. Well, I think it starts with curiosity. And if you think about it, that's one of the main qualities that children have, right? They're very curious and they're not dogmatic about
So
things.
true.
And when you start to become curious again, that's when that
Questioning everything.
that's when that childlike heart starts to reappear. And what's
Yeah.
what's amazing is that when you tap into that state of consciousness, it feels like returning home. It doesn't feel like something new. There's
Mhm.
something very authentic and comforting with being curious. And that's when things start to shift because you start asking questions like I said, I was doing when I was deconstructing. It all started with questioning everything and then having this mentality of, I know nothing,
Yes.
which is a
Yes.
very humbling place to
Yes.
to be.
A
But
hundred
when you
percent.
when you are there and you say, what do I actually know? And maybe the journey is not about learning more things and attaining more information, but maybe it's about unlearning. Because that was one of the things I really got into during my season of awakening, when the early stages of it. I started to study a lot of the Christian mystics because I was like, yeah, they're actually experiencing what I'm experiencing. And
Hmm.
I'm going within to experience God, and this is what they're writing about. And they have their methods, contemplative prayer, meditation, whatever. But one of the things that they were talking about was it's not about more theology, it's not about more philosophy or knowledge or whatever. It's about letting all of that go. It's about deprogramming to where you get to this place of saying, I don't know really anything. And from that place, which is original innocence, that is when, from the space, from stillness, from silence, from presence, that is when you shift gears into something called experiential knowledge or divine knowledge, which is coming from your heart and
Yes.
not so much from your head. And then you start to be led and guided from that place, from that intuition, from that experiential knowledge. And yeah, like from that place, it's pure mystery. I believe God is mystery. And I always quote something from Richard Rohr. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
I'm not.
He's a modern Christian mystic, but he said something one time where he said, a mystery is not something that you cannot understand. It's something that you can understand endlessly. So that's the approach you start to have and the approach you start to walk with. You realize that this is a mystery, this life, this journey, the divine. Like it's not something that can be fully grasped by the finite mind. And you learn to be
Impossible.
okay with that.
It's impossible to really understand what's happening 100%.
Right. But you learn to just embrace and be okay with not knowing.
Right. Right.
And it's hard to explain this unless you've experienced it. But from that place of acceptance and surrendering to the mystery, there is this peace that surpasses all understanding that arises from within the depths of your being. And that's when that childlike energy returns.
Yeah.
And it's crazy to, again, explain this, but from that state of being, you can know, again, knowledge in the level of the heart, you can know more than you could ever know from your finite, analytical, theological thinking mind.
Yes, yes. It's so interesting.
So, yeah,
When my father passed away, in when was the pandemic? It was 2020, right? So
2020. Yeah, sorry
2019.
to hear that.
Yeah, thank you. He was we were really close, and he was a really political prisoner, super bright man. Deep thinker, read a lot of books when he was in prison in Cuba, and a lot of our conversation when right before he was passing, that he was, he had a couple of months left, was all about, what happens, the big question, where do we go? What happens to our body? Do we reconnect with our loved ones? And it's like all of these questions that you can't have these conversations with just anybody, even if you are experiencing, the exit or the transition to the other side. Not everybody's comfortable having these types of conversations because they're so profound and there's so much fear behind it. Because everybody's like, oh my God, when I die, my family, what's going to happen to them, or where do we go? We go to hell because I was a bad person on this earth, And none of that
Mm,
is true. It's what we go back to. Once we deconstruct all of this programming that's so fear-based inside of our subconscious, and we start really understanding things from the pureness that we truly have within us, there's nothing to be afraid of. There really isn't. Just, stay curious,
right.
become a child again, right? And
Yeah.
then speaking about like the ego, for example, right? Is the ego, in your opinion, considered to be something evil, or can it serve a purpose within a spiritual path and awakening? Because the ego's always what's in the way, it seems, right? With anything that we're trying
Yeah.
to do spiritually, it's like, don't do that. And,
Yeah. Yeah.
it seems like
Yeah.
it's your little devil talking to you, on the left side.
I think that fundamentally it's neutral.
Yeah.
Now, if you believe it's evil, if you believe it's whatever, then it can be that for you, but fundamentally it's neutral. And this is something that we're not born with. The ego is something that's developed over time, and it's simply who we think we are. And so this is a mental construct. It is a program that develops from, how we were raised, what our parents said about us, what our friends said about us, teachers, coaches. There's all these different influences and circumstances that construct this identity of who we think we are. And what happens is once that starts to be built, we become attached to it. We believe that this is who we are. And we literally have like this image in our heads of who we are and what that looks like.
Mm.
And then we spend most of our lives trying to keep that egoic construct up. And this is where a lot of the comparison comes in, or the
Yes.
judgment, or the striving, or the performance, and it's very exhausting. It's very exhausting to keep this egoic facade up, but we feel like we have to do it. It almost becomes like this survival mechanism.
Yes. Yes.
And the ego is the construct of it is based upon separateness, separation consciousness. So that's why there's so much fear around it, and that's why you have the survival mechanism embedded into it, because you're actually believing, you're actually thinking that this is all that you are. You're a separate entity traveling through time and space on this planet, and you're finite, and it's a very limited way to live. But again, this is something that we all experience. And when you start to, for most people, when they start to question everything, like we talked about earlier, or when something really devastating happens in their
Right.
lives, and they're they get to this place of even questioning not just like theological stuff or philosophy or these big existential questions, but they start questioning like who they even are.
Why am I here?
That's what, yeah, yeah. That's when the construct starts to break down.
Yeah.
And that's the beginning of awakening. But then what happens is people will they'll get into this mindset of, okay, I've recognized that I have this ego. I know it's not me. So they actually are awakening. Their true self is now emerging. But
Mm-hmm.
now they're in this state of mind of, okay, the evil's bad. Like I said, they're judging it because they know how much it's limited them and they know how much it set them back. So they're automatically perceiving it to be something that's against them, an enemy. And from this place, there's a lot of fighting, and you're trying to push it away,
Yeah.
and you're trying to
Proving
transcend it.
yourself. You're proving yourself over and over and over
And it
again.
just, yeah, and it just becomes something that really is unnecessary, because the reality of it is, the ego doesn't actually exist
It
as an
doesn't?
entity, as a thing. It's a mental construct, but it's not like an actual thing that exists. So we could say it's illusory in nature.
It's a man-made
So
illusion.
if I'm going to sit there and try to fight it, it's like shadow boxing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not an actual thing there that I'm
There's not a
trying to get rid
physical
of. And
thing
so,
there. Yeah. I gotcha.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So the way it's actually transcended is by you resting in the truth of your nature, which is beyond time and space. It's infinite, it's eternal, it's divine. And again, as that light emerges, then the ego just kind of fades, or your identification or attachment to it starts to fade. Then you realize, okay, wait a second. I know who I really am. I know I'm divine. I know I'm a spiritual being having a temporary human experience. Okay, now from this place, I'm still having the human experience. So I understand that the ego actually plays a role in this experience, but now I'm not living from this place of totally being identified with just solely it.
Right.
And so Ken Wilber says we transcend and include. So you transcend identification or attachment with the ego, but then you include it within your human experience. So you can actually, from your higher self, from your true self, you can actually start to channel that energy through your ego, through your incarnation, through your human experience. And now you're in the world, but you're not of it. And
Okay.
so it can become a tool for not only awakening, but also for living from your true self in your human incarnation, which is, I think, really what enlightenment is all about.
For sure. For sure.
Yeah, yeah,
What about searching for that external validation? Because I think that that's another very human need, is that we're all looking for some sort of validation. And how do we truly begin to validate ourselves where we don't need it from anybody else, from another person, but from within us? Like how do we get to
yeah,
that perspective during this awakening that starts to happen? Because I think that no matter how good of a person you may think you are, or humble, or religious, there's always that judgment that affects you, right? Where it questions your, it questions even what you're believing, because what are they going to think about me? Or what are they going to say about me? And it's what you were touching on a little bit earlier today. But really, that external validation, to look for it within us. How do we do that?
Well, external validation is actually just something that is coming from a place in you that doesn't fully validate you
It's
or
all
doesn't
it's
fully
all it's
accept
all our
you.
own perspective. It's all our own perspective and others.
Right. So what ends up happening is because I mean, you're not seeing life or reality as it is, you're seeing it as you are.
Right.
So if within you there's a ton of like, self judgment or condemnation or shame or whatever, that's going to get projected onto others. And again, that's going to be how you perceive others and relationships and different circumstances and situations. And so what happens is when you start to do the inner work and you start to experience that inner alchemy, and you're living from wholeness, and what does that actually mean? Well, the way into a life that's rooted and grounded in wholeness is self-love, it's self-acceptance, it's self-compassion, which
Forgiveness,
sounds simple.
self-forgiveness.
Exactly. I mean, these things sound simple and just very basic,
They're
but
not.
that's actually where
They're
they're
actually
not,
not.
right? But that's where it actually starts.
That's where
That's
the magic
where the
happens.
truth is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, like Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself. But most people have never loved themselves, or they don't even know what it means to love or accept or forgive themselves, right?
Yeah.
So that's the biggest issue at hand. It's starting with you. And what you realize is that when you start to really embody unconditional love, non judgment, first and foremost for yourself, and I mean genuinely and honestly, then all of the sudden, any kind of perceived judgment from others, you automatically recognize that as wait a second, this person is not actually judging me because they don't know me.
Right.
They're
What a,
judging their own perception of me, which
right.
isn't even true. It's just their own perception.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I know from my experience, from my inner transformation, that when I used to go around judging people, I wasn't actually, or what I was doing was I was projecting my own rejection and my own
To myself.
judgment and my own, yeah, onto others. And now I know that's what they're doing. And so you can now at this point, you can have the compassion and the understanding and the clarity,
That empathy that it,
empathy.
yeah, where you get
Yeah,
it. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
One of the things that you say is, I'm not afraid to fail. I'm afraid to arrive. And that resonated with me so much because we're all here to serve a purpose, and we're all questioning, what am I here to do? There's something bigger out there for me. And then we work so hard to get to that point. And then once we get there, it's like there's that fear, like, okay, what about if I fail once I get there? What about if I suck once I'm in there, right? So there's that. Why do we get so afraid of that actual manifestation that we've been asking for so much to actually arrive?
Because we're not familiar with it, and that's how the nervous system operates.
The
It
unknown.
operates based upon what is familiar, what you're comfortable with, what feels safe.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, going back to what we said earlier, true awakening starts with this embrace of uncertainty. It's stepping into the wilderness. It's learning how to dance with mystery. And, for many people, like that is scary because uh, who knows what's going to happen? And it requires surrender, it requires trust. I think of in the Gospel of Thomas saying, too, Jesus says something like, um, whoever is seeking should not stop seeking until they find. When they find, they will be troubled and devastated. But then, after being troubled and devastated, they will become amazed and astonished, and they'll reign over the all. And what he is essentially saying
The
there
Great Awakening.
is this, yeah, that's the awakening journey in a nutshell, in a
Yeah.
verse, and in one
Mm-hmm.
saying. But what ultimately happens is when you learn, and I keep saying it, but it's a matter of trust, surrender, and letting go. And you just learn to live and be with what is. So acceptance. Um, Without you even realizing it, you are reprogramming your subconscious and your nervous system is becoming recalibrated. And you start to feel safe in the present moment, and again, that only happens through surrender and acceptance. And then once that happens, your vibrational frequency raises to its natural level, which it's naturally high. It's naturally that of love and peace and joy and authenticity.
Hmm.
And when that happens, then you're literally sending out a signal into the quantum field that is very magnetic. And now all of these things that you've been wanting to experience or you've been trying to manifest or whatever, instead of you like chasing them and then getting right to that point where, okay, it's about to happen, but then
And
it
then,
doesn't because
right.
fear kicks in because you're afraid of what it would look like for your life to shift in that way. That dissolves because now you're already living from that place. That version of you that you've been chasing is now what you're embodying. And now everything is now chasing you.
I love
That's
that.
what magnetism is all about.
Yeah. It's
So
learning
yeah, I mean
learning
it
to let
starts off,
go of that control and trusting the universe's bigger picture. Really, that's in essence that's the formula right there. Let go, let go.
yeah,
Put the intention out there, put the thought out there, put in the work, be a good person, be a good human being, you know?
yeah,
But just let go and trust and have that faith that everything is going to happen in divine timing. Because that's another thing. We
right.
want that. We want it now. I want it right
Yeah.
now. It's not meant to happen right now because you're not ready and you're going to blow it if we send it to you right now. So we're going to do it once you've evolved and you're ready to receive it. Now, how do we
Yeah.
recharge energetic, that electricity that we all have within us? How do we recharge that other than again what we've talked about earlier, the meditation and out in nature? Other techniques that you can share with us that you've implemented with some of your coaching, one-on-one coaching with your clients that could help us?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. So the body is electrical first and foremost. So I often say, we're so adamant about charging our devices at night, right? Our phones, we
Yeah.
charge it every night just to make sure that it's ready to go first thing in the morning. And we never think about charging ourselves or our bodies when,
Hmm.
again, our bodies are so much more, uh, um, or they carry a much higher voltage than something like a cell phone.
Hmm.
And most people would think, oh, well, I charge my body when I sleep at night. Well, that's just a
I would think that,
small
yeah.
part of the equation.
Hmm.
There's definitely that's an aspect of it. But here's the thing: speaking from my own experience and from working with many people and just people that I know people that get 6, 7 hours of sleep every night, but they wake up feeling like crap. They
Hired.
don't wake up feeling charged or energized or
That's
no, they,
me.
yeah, exactly.
That's me a lot of the
Exhausted.
times. Yeah.
Yeah. So then the question is, okay, if I'm actually, I mean, I know I'm sleeping for this amount of time, but why do I not wake up feeling charged?
Why am I so drained?
Right. And what it actually goes back to is circadian rhythm. So your circadian rhythm is actually what's in control of your body's electrical charge. And the reason for that is because uh, we talk about oneness and unity consciousness all the time, but mainly from a very spiritual sense. But if we're going to talk like that and believe that that is a fundamental truth, then we have to realize that that also applies to biology. We can't divorce spirituality from biology because, again, in reality, if everything is one, which is what quantum physics has shown us,
Hmm.
everything that is a thing in the universe is pure energy, and this energy is undivided. It's one infinite sea of energy that's manifesting in all these different forms, different vibrational frequencies, but fundamentally, it's all the same thing, which is what some people would call source or God or the divine or whatever.
Hmm.
So everything is one. So our physical bodies are not separate from the earth. We think they are, but they're not. They are the earth. We are the earth. Every element that makes up the physical body can be found in the earth. So when you wake up in the morning and you're exposed to morning sunlight, what
So important,
happens
right? Like go
is
outside and within the first
so
5 minutes of
important.
waking up, get some sun.
Before you look at your phone, before
Yeah.
you stare at a screen, what that is doing is that is setting your circadian rhythm, which is causing your brain to know what hormones need to be released at that
Gotcha.
time. It also and that controls things like your metabolism. And there's so many things that go into it, but essentially that starts the track for the day. And when you're outside throughout the day, or as much as you can be outside,
Mhm.
and you're in the sun, even if it's cloudy, what happens is your skin, which is the largest organ
Mm-hmm.
that we have, the skin, is acting like a solar panel. And so it's absorbing the photons from the sun, the light is going into your cells where there is water, and the water is being structured from the light that's entering the cells. And that's what's creating the water actually shifts to something called EZ water, exclusion zone, which actually creates the charge for your cells in that process. So that's actually, I mean, the human body is made up of, roughly, what is it, 38 trillion to 50 trillion cells, depending on who you're talking to. So that's how we're actually physically charged by sunlight, water
Water.
in the cells, and magnetism. So when you're outside and your skin is touching the earth, you're earthing or grounding, you're absorbing electrons, which is adding to that whole process of mitochondrial charge or whatever you want to call it. But to me, that's like really, that's the holy trinity. It's light,
Yes.
water, magnetism.
Hmm.
And, I can sit here and explain the science behind it, which is helpful and it's useful. But just about like it, anyone that has been to the beach, for example, when you're at the beach and you're walking
On the sands.
on the sand,
Hmm.
and it's a perfect day and you're getting sun, that when you're out there, you feel different, you feel alive, you feel healthy, you feel energized and
Peaceful.
peaceful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
And
a
it's like, it's not just because you're on vacation, it's because you're plugged into the source, you're
you're
being charged. Yeah. And so this isn't something that we can only experience when we go to the beach. We can experience it each and every day. It doesn't have to be for hours. I understand that, okay, we have to be real, reasonable, practical.
yeah,
We're busy,
everybody's
we're
working.
working.
Hmm.
Exactly. But I'm talking about, if you can, this is a matter of doing what you can. If you
Like
can just,
how long would you recommend in the morning? I'm waking up, I gotta go to work. 15
yeah.
minutes, 10 minutes?
Yeah, yeah, that's perfect. 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes if you can. You don't have to, by the way, you don't have to be watching the sunrise. That's another misconception people
Right.
have, because obviously, for many people, including myself, where I live, there's tons of trees around me. So
Yeah,
I can't
yeah.
actually watch the sunrise. Doesn't matter. As long as you're outside in the morning, your body, your skin, your eyes are absorbing the light. Your brain knows what time it is. And that's the other thing, every cell in your body has a clock
Hmm.
that is designed to be in sync with the Earth's natural light and dark cycle.
There's
So, I mean,
there's a mystic that I follow. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. His name is a guru, and he talks about the importance of the basicness. If you can rise and fall the way that, for example, birds and animals do, right? They wake up when the sun is rising. They go to sleep when it's getting
yeah,
dark. And if you could really follow that flow, again, realistically, we all have jobs, we have so many responsibilities, families, children's, but if you can follow that cycle, your whole composition, your whole biological composition changes, and you don't
yes,
feel that energetic drain or mental fogginess that, so many of us experience with the exhaustion that we have to lead on a daily basis here, with
Right.
life, you know.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and it sounds so basic when you the way that you're like, go outside and get to look at the sun and walk around the
Yeah.
block if you can. and
Yeah.
and it's true because I mean, I can speak personally whenever I feel that I go into hermit mode, that I don't leave my house, I start feeling a little blue, and I'm just like, yeah, I need to go outside. I need to walk a little bit. I need to get some sun on my face. And automatically
Yeah.
that shifts my whole mental status, as soon as I just
Yeah.
get a little bit of
Yeah.
sun on me. Um, so
Can I add something?
yeah, go,
I'm gonna add
please.
one quick thing to that. So it's one thing to go outside in the mornings, to go on your walks, to do what you do. But when you actually start to do these things with intention
Mm,
and with belief, that's when it actually makes a difference in your life.
mm,
So it's not a matter of just going through the motions or, oh, it's the sunrise. I need to go watch the sunrise. I need to go to bed at early or whatever. Like, because a lot of people do that and they haven't experienced any of the benefits or any of the change that is possible when you live in harmony with nature. But again, when you combine the power of belief and intention with the action, that's when true transformation happens.
yeah, yeah, agreed. I agree. Let's see. Oh, one of the things that I thought was super fascinating that you talk about on your channel is how there's a belief right now or a feeling where the world really feels like it's speeding up. Time is really speeding up. And when I heard you talk about that, I was like, yes, but is it like I'm 48 when you get older? You know, time speeds up
Yeah.
because you're getting older, right? And you do
Yeah.
think that way.
Yeah.
But lately, like you blink and it's January. Now we're, mid-May. What's happening? Is it a planetary evolution because we're entering into a new phase of the planet? Like they say, the old planet is dying and the new one is starting. Is there some truth to that? Is it a solar change that's happening with outer space? Like what's happening there?
Yeah. I think it's a combination of like pretty much all those things you just mentioned.
Hmm.
So I don't think it's one sole thing. But for me, because I can only speak from my experience, um, I've noticed it really since 2020.
The pandemic,
And
the
that,
pandemic really did a number on all of us, I think, where a lot
yeah.
of people were forced to awaken, right? Through the
Mhm.
isolation and the fear, and everybody really started questioning what was happening. Yeah, absolutely. The pandemic,
Yeah.
the pandemic definitely played a number.
It was weird because I feel like for me, 2020, that year went by super slow because we were all forced to stop what we were doing for the most part and
Hmm.
slow down. And there was a lot of uncertainty and it was just a weird time. So I remember for me, that year was super slow. And it was actually, um, I had a lot of time to do some introspection and inner work. So that was going on. But then it was right like towards the end of 2020, 2021, 2022. That's when it really started to, or at least it seemed like time was accelerating. And that's when I was really getting into my awakening. And so as I'm starting to wake up more and more, I'm living from presence more. I'm not
Yeah,
living from the past and the future. And when you're living from presence, all of a sudden you realize that time is an illusion.
totally.
So that's the first thing that we have to acknowledge. Like linear time as we know it isn't absolute, it's not fundamental,
It's
it's
man-made.
relative
It's
as
man-made.
exactly. So when you get out of that matrix, you literally transcend it and you live from your true self, which is timeless. Then I think that has a major impact on your perception of time in your human incarnation.
That's a great
That's on an
explanation.
individual level. That can also happen collectively which is also what we're simultaneously experiencing
A hundred
as we are
percent.
entering the age of Aquarius.
Yes. Are we in the age of, are we in Aquarius already, or are we still in the process of shifting into it?
I think we're in it. I think
Yeah.
we're in the early stages of it.
And
Yeah. So it's
and
just,
so what does that mean? What does that mean, the age of Aquarius? What is that supposed to represent as a collective for
yeah.
all of us?
So this age is really all about direct knowing. And so we're moving past belief. That's the first thing. We're coming out of Pisces, which had a lot to do with faith and religion and believing in things in order for you to be saved or enlightened or whatever. But in this age of Aquarius, it's not about like submitting to these spiritual authorities and being a part of these different systems. It's about your own individual awakening. That's where it starts. Inner knowing, gnosis. The truth is within you, the Christ is within you, the Buddha is within you. And then expressing that very authentically into the world. That's what this is all about. And it doesn't just apply to spirituality, it applies to every aspect of life. And that's why we're seeing these immense changes in all these different areas and fields. And I think the shift in that, just the shift in and of itself, is causing time to speed up, or the perception of time. So you've got that going on. You've got people awakening more than ever all over the world, experiencing their own inner transformation and transcendence of time. Now they're starting to walk in that age of Aquarius energy, and they're reclaiming their power, their sovereignty.
Amen to that,
And
right?
it's just, yeah, it's what a time to be
I
alive.
agree. If there's a time to be alive, it was right now. And we asked for it. And that's why we're here to experience
Yeah.
all these new shifts that are happening on this planet, as hard as they are. But again, we go back to, if we can look at it from that different perception, right? That
Yeah.
we have from a present moment, and we can
Hmm.
kind of like have the faith and understand that everything is going to work out. Life is beautiful. It really is. We make life difficult. We really do. We make life difficult for ourselves. Let me ask you
Yeah.
about your book. Tell me a little bit about
Yeah.
the mystery in you, discovering God in the deepest part of your being. What inspired you
Yeah.
to write this
Yeah.
book?
Really, it was my dark night of the soul slash awakening season. So, growing up, I was separate from God. God was the big man upstairs, or the Trinity, or, even perceiving God to be Jesus and Jesus alone, or whatever. Like all those different phases, all those different beliefs that I had consisted of separation and God being out there somewhere. And when I started questioning everything and being curious, and I
Yeah.
started going within, and I started sitting with, like I said, what I was feeling, all the suffering at the time, the suffering actually caused me to realize that there was this depth to my being that I had no idea existed. So it's amazing how the suffering actually acted as a form of grace that led me into my soul. And that's when I started meditating, and I started learning how to actually go there in my own consciousness. And that's where I discovered God
Mhm.
for myself directly. And it changed me forever because I realized that separation is an illusion.
Yeah. He was always with you.
And always within me, and not just within me, but within everyone and everything,
Right.
because God is infinite. Again, oneness, unity consciousness. And so this was something that I had experienced directly a few times through these pretty ineffable mystical experiences. And they were kind of like glimpses, so I would get a taste of it, but then I would forget about it, or I was trying to get back to that place. I was chasing that high. Um, and I just became obsessed with the idea of it, with the theology of God being within. And of course, this is something that we even find in the Bible from Jesus. Jesus talks about the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God being within. Other mystics, other sages have talked about this for thousands of years. So I started writing about it because that's the only way I knew how to express what I was going through and what this new revelation meant for me. And that started with blogs. Then it turned into Facebook posts. And then people were like, hey, dude, you got to write a book. Like what you're writing is really profound.
How
It's
long
really
ago
speaking
was
to
this?
me. I started writing it in 2022.
Okay.
So 3 years ago. Yeah. So that's when I started writing it. And it only took me about 4 or 5 months to write it.
Because it was always
And that's
within
not a,
you. Yeah, you were
yeah,
ready. You were
yeah,
ready to, start vomiting all this information out for everybody to see.
yeah,
You just weren't you were scared. You were scared of what others
right.
were going to think. You weren't ready yet mentally. Um,
Exactly. Yeah. But it's only 130 pages, so it didn't take me that long. But what happened was when I wrote it, I was still very much how do I say this? I was still heavily influenced by a lot of Christian mysticism,
sure.
which tends to be still somewhat connected to a little bit of the Christian orthodoxy or different doctrines that I was still kind of dogmatic about at the time.
Hmm.
And since that time, I've let go of the dogmatism, and I no longer consider myself to be a part of any one tradition or religion.
Hmm.
So about a year after, or about a year and a half after I wrote the book, I published or I wrote a blog talking about the shift in my beliefs and how I'm no longer identified with any particular tradition or belief system because I realized that if I'm going to keep growing and evolving, I can't be boxed in to one thing
Hmm.
because I'm always changing my mind, because I'm always questioning, because that's just the way my soul functions. And so um, that was one of the things I dealt with a lot, especially after my awakening and starting to question the evangelicalism. People would come to me and they'd say, "Hey, what are you now?" And what they meant was, "What do I believe?" So they were trying to equate my beliefs with who I was, and I'm sitting there thinking at the time, it's just impossible for you to even try to attempt to do this because my beliefs are all over the place right now. I'm
Hmm.
deconstructing. I'm seeing things from a different perspective. So, what's crazy is in The Mystery in You, I wrote in the introduction that something like, I really feel led to write how this is how I see things right now. But there's a good chance that if you read this in a few months or a
It'll
few
be different.
years, I'm going to change a little bit, and I have. So the book has still been very helpful. A lot of people have said that it's a great uh, stepping stone book out of Christian fundamentalism into more of a Christian mysticism that is more inclusive and universal. I didn't believe in hell or any of that at the time, so it still carries that heart and that universal non-judgment love, but still kind of through the lens of Christian mysticism.
I love it. Where can we find the book? Where is it available?
It's on Amazon,
Hmm.
and I talk about it on my website.
On your website as well. I saw it
So,
there.
but I think on my website, the link that I have set up to it is to Amazon. Yeah.
Hmm.
And I'm working on my second book.
I saw
I
that.
just finished the manuscript a couple of weeks ago, so I'm in the process of editing it, and I'd like to have that published by the end of this year,
How
but who
exciting.
knows?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you, thank you.
Do you have a name for the new book?
I don't have a name yet, which is interesting because I was inspired by another author who said that they don't come up with their titles till they're finished writing. Or I think they said, they had written a lot of books, and they said that for some of the books they wrote, they had the title before,
Hmm.
but now they're starting to write the book and then really sit with the energy of the book and allow the title to just come from, this place of wholeness once the book is written.
Yeah, that
So
makes
that's kind of what
sense.
I'm doing. I still don't have a title for it. But it's essentially about the journey of awakening.
Yeah.
That's what I'll say at this point.
Okay, well, I'm looking forward to reading it when it's available for sure. Um,
Yeah.
so Logan, let's close this out. This has been such an amazing podcast. Thank you so much. You've been so um educational with all of your wisdom, biblical wisdom and, theology and just talking about God and awakening. Again, this is just something that we need more people to come out and speak about it because it's still, people are still very embarrassed. It's still somewhat of a taboo subject in a lot of people or households, right? And this is only good for ourselves. It's going to make us feel better. A lot of people I feel like are in a dark place. I know that I went through one. I went through that dark night of the soul, and my God, I do not wish that upon anyone. It's a horrible feeling to
Mm.
be in. You almost don't want to be here at times. Um and really once you get out of that funk, that hole, and you really start going with the flow, you realize that you are here for a reason and there is a higher purpose for you. And just like you said, focus on everything from the present moment. Forgive the past.
Yeah.
Don't focus too much on the future, right? Because it's
Yeah.
nobody
Yeah.
really knows what's going to happen there. And just live in a state of presence, and try to do the best you can for the world. So with anybody that feels incredibly disconnected still,
Mm.
especially after COVID, the pandemic, a lot of people I know are still struggling. A lot of people lost their homes, lost their jobs. They're still recuperating financially, or they're feeling confused on their spiritual path right now. What recommendations would you have for them to help them and to know that everything is going to
Yeah.
be okay?
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Well, I would say that, one thing we all know about this life, this existence, is that we can't control the waves. We cannot control the waves of life, but we can learn to surf. So when you start to learn how to surf, you start to understand that there are some things that you can take responsibility for and you can change. And it starts with your inner state of being. And this can be something as simple as learning a practice like meditation,
Hmm.
mindfulness, connecting with nature. And again, these things sound simple and basic, but when you start to change your inner world, you have this peace and confidence in knowing that, okay, I might not, or it seems like I can't change all these things that are happening around me, but I can change the energy within me.
Hmm.
And maybe if I can shift the energy within me and I can walk from this higher state of consciousness, or I can live from this inherent liberation, maybe all of a sudden the waters around me will settle down. And maybe the power within me is a lot stronger than I think. And maybe I can be the change I want to see in the world. And maybe I am the light of the world. And I say maybe because this is all about directly experiencing it. This
Right.
is not about, you know, thinking about something or trying a new philosophy out. No, this is about something that you have to experience. But, you know, uh, the encouragement is the spiritual journey is a very individual journey,
Yes.
and you are unfolding your own myth, as Rumi said. And you've got to really embrace that. And you got to understand that there will be trials and tribulations, and there's valleys.
Regardless,
And
that is,
that's,
yeah, that's just
yeah,
part of life. That's just part of this human existence. We're going to have the trials and the tribulations. We just need to
yeah,
learn how to go with the flow and not dwell so much
you,
in them, because that's another thing. We just dwell on the problem and dwell on the problem, and we
yeah,
just we make the problem bigger than what it really is.
yeah. But despite all that, you can be free.
Yeah.
Freedom is something that you can actually experience directly for yourself, because ultimately freedom is not something to be attained or achieved. It's actually a part of your true nature. So is
Yes.
peace. So is happiness, joy, whatever it, like all these divine qualities that we spend all this time and energy searching for out there somewhere are all divine qualities of our being.
Yeah.
So
And controlling our thoughts, right? That's also huge. And being able to
yeah,
implement all of these other steps because our mind is just
yeah,
ongoing all the time and gives us false plays of what's happening out there, you know?
yeah, yeah, yeah. But the thoughts often respond to the nervous system and how the body feels. So I've noticed that when I'm grounded, when I'm outside, when I'm doing something as simple as moving, like going for a walk, my mind slows down. My
Oh
mind
yeah.
follows my body, you know. And that's the other part of like being inside all day indoors. Like we're not designed for this. So
No.
the body becomes out of alignment. There's dysfunction, there's disharmony. And then that's when the mind starts overthinking because the mind knows that, okay, the body is in this environment for too long, longer than it was designed for,
Right.
disconnected from the earth, disconnected from the
Artificial
sun. And it,
lighting. Yeah, yeah. It's
artificial light, and it starts, that's when it starts really overthinking. And yeah, so there's so much that goes into it, but it's not as complicated as the mind will make it out to be.
yeah.
Return to the basics of being, embrace the stillness, embrace silence, ground, and things will start to shift.
Logan, so these are all techniques that you personally do one-on-one coaching, and help
Yes.
others achieve this level of enlightenment, or at least walking them toward that direction, for them to better understand themselves. So how can somebody reach out to you? Why don't you share
Yep.
your website and also on social where they can reach out to you in? So I know a lot of people here are gonna want to reach out to you for sure. You have a lot of you have a lot of knowledge and are very understanding of what a person is going through during a spiritual awakening, and maybe they're during that
Yeah.
dark phase of it, and they really don't see a way out. And I recently had he was a friend of a friend's, but I went out with him a few times, within a group, and he was very depressed. He had this energy, Logan, where at one point my buddy, we were going to a drum roll on the beach and in Miami Beach, and my friend got off to get water for us to have on the beach, and I stayed in the car with him for like whatever it was, 5 minutes. That the energy of depression, and it was like that man's soul was crying. When I was left alone with him in the
Mm.
car, I felt something where I got so sad and I couldn't wait for my buddy to get back in the car. And then we went to the beach and he was dancing with everybody. He was having a good time, but deep inside I saw how he was struggling. Long story short, fast forward, 2 months later, he got a gun and he killed himself. You know,
Mm.
he didn't see a way out. And then he was always complaining about a relationship and he was so sad. And I was like, oh, everybody goes through that. Everybody's going to complain. He's going through that part. But some people actually take it to that next level, right? And
Mm.
that's, that's not the way out. That's definitely never the way out. You will get out of this hole. You will get out of this dark spot that you're in, and this is all a part of evolving. So this is what you do, and this
Yeah.
is how you teach people understand this awakening. So where can they reach you?
Yeah, so my website's loganbarone.com, and I don't know where you're going to be posting this, but wherever you post it, you could probably put the link somewhere, maybe in the description, or is this
No, no, so this is a YouTube podcast. And then what
okay?
I do is once I post this, which I'll post it tonight and I'll send you a clip so that you can
Yep,
have it. I'll be posting clips all week as well. Just to
cool.
kind of promote the podcast on all my social media platforms. But on the comment
Okay,
section, I'll put the links to all of your
yep,
socials. So I know you have a
okay,
TikTok
cool.
one. Are
Yep,
you on
TikTok.
Instagram?
I am. It's probably my least active,
Mm-hmm.
but social media platform that I'm on. But yes, Instagram, Facebook. I'm
Mm-hmm.
very active on Facebook. YouTube. I
Okay.
post 2 videos a week on YouTube.
Perfect.
So I've got long form, short form, and then yeah, as far as the coaching goes, all that information is on my website. I also have a coaching email, baronecoaching@gmail.com,
Okay.
which is probably the fastest way to reach out to me directly about coaching. I also offer free discovery calls just to discuss the coaching and to understand where the person is at. before they commit to any kind of coaching work together. So yeah.
Are all of your courses one-on-one, or do you have group settings as well?
Um, yeah, everything is one on one as far as my coaching packages go.
Uh-huh.
But I just started offering group coaching
Okay.
this month. I just had my first group coaching session last week, actually. So that is now something that I'm offering. I just haven't talked about it that much yet because it's still pretty new. But yes, it's group coaching, one on one. I don't have any courses where it's like course material. It's literally all me working one on one. And sometimes there is, course like material included in different packages with through PDFs and stuff like that. But the focus is always one on one work.
That's great. That's awesome. That's really, really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great, Logan. So I want to thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. And I loved it. I loved this podcast so much. I was mesmerized by everything that you were saying. So I'm looking forward to sharing it on YouTube. And
Awesome.
yeah, to anyone that's watching and wants to reach out to Logan, I'll make sure to add everything like I mentioned on the comment section. I want to thank all of you for tuning in to the Bear Experiment podcast. I'm your host, Monica Clavijo, and please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also, hitting the notification bell so that you never miss an episode and amazing guests like Logan that are coming on the show to help us elevate our spiritual purposes on this life path. So, thanks again, and thank you, Logan. Appreciate your time. I hope you have a great rest of the day. Okay.
Thank you, Monica. You too.